Sri Krishna Parabrahmane Namaha. Sri Sadguru Paramatmane Namaha. Sarva Maharshibhyo Namaha. The method of conquering kama is pointed out. 41st sloka. Tasmatva indriyanyadau niyamya bharatarshabha papmanam prajahihenam gnana vignana nashanam. Substance. O Arjuna, therefore, having controlled the senses in the beginning, kill surely this kama, this sinful destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. Commentary. Kama or lust functions by first enslaving the senses, then deluding the mind, then confusing the intellect. In the actual act of enjoyment, no one can make the division, but sadhana consists in analyzing the mechanism of the body and mind. The Lord insists on sense control as the first step to get rid of kama. The senses are like the main gateway of a fort. If the enemy is attacked and repelled at the gate, he cannot enter the fort. The senses should not be allowed to possess the mind by filling it with sense objects of pleasure. So the senses should be controlled first. The enjoyments derived through the senses should be given up by the practice of discrimination and dispassion. This is the starting point of spiritual advancement. The Lord says to every seeker, whatever other obstacles and difficulties there may be, look to this first. Control the senses. Other things shall follow later. Therefore, let every seeker examine the outgoing senses and find out the objects towards which they are running. Let them turn away from them by examining and understanding their filthy nature. Sinful. The nature of kama is sin. It is all sinful mahapapa. The most heinous sins are committed by man under the pressure of kama. Thoughtful men know the cursed crimes that men commit by this horrible demon of kama. Blinded by kama, man forgets what is right and wrong. All the Shastric injunctions are violated. All common moral principles are set at naught, and shame and fear are lost. When the demands of kama press for immediate satisfaction, the desire for lust and gold, position and power have undone the best and wisest men even, and the world has suffered serious disasters in consequence. Destroyer of knowledge and realization means gnana means knowledge acquired by the study of the Shastras. Vijnana means direct knowledge of the self. The first is the indirect knowledge, paroksha gnana, and the second is the direct knowledge, aparoksha gnana, practical experience of the self. Both are destroyed by kama. What little knowledge is acquired, what little experience is acquired by the sadhaka, all this is cancelled and nullified by the virulence of kama. We see highly learned men and gifted people yielding to common temptations like the most unlearned and ignorant. Such is the overwhelming power of kama. But the power, like the gravitational pull of the earth, can work only up to a certain radius. These men who pass beyond its range are the free and the perfect. Kama cannot do anything to them. They are the Jivan Muktas, the living, free, blessed men who live in the self and have absolutely no relish for the foul and filthy enjoyments of earthly life. The Lord never for a moment says that kama cannot be conquered. That is not the import of these verses. Only the evil power of kama is explained in full in order to inspire the aspirant with greater zeal and enthusiasm to overcome this deadly foe. Prajahi means conquer. That is the watchword, the war cry of the seeker. The Lord is behind every seeker, every sincere devotee. Therefore, no man need to be disheartened by thinking of the power of the inimical forces. Question. What is the first duty of the sadhaka? Answer. Sense control. Question. How will sense control help? Answer. It destroys karma. Question. How does the evil power of karma work? Answer. It destroys both spiritual knowledge and experience. The nature of Atma is explained. 42nd sloka. Indriyani paranyahuhu. Indriyebhyah param manaha. Manasastu para buddhiryoh. Buddheh paratastu saha. Substance. They say that the senses are superior to the body. Superior to the senses is the mind. Superior to the mind is the intellect. But superior than the intellect is he, the Atman. Commentary. In the previous verses, sense restraint is enjoined as the first condition of spiritual progress. But how to achieve it? The Lord answers it in this verse. Unless one stands above his enemy or acquires greater strength than the enemy, he cannot defeat him. So one should understand what the position of the senses is in the organism of the human being. No doubt the senses are superior to the bodily organs like hands and legs because they have a wider range of activity. But the mind is superior to the senses because it has a still wider range of activity and endowed with higher powers of generating action. But the intellect is superior to the mind because the operations of the mind are subject to the dictates of the intellect, which directs the mind in its various activities. But higher than the intellect and greater than all stands the Atma, the omnipotent, the omniscient, and the omnipresent, ever blissful self. The self is almighty, nothing can touch it or affect it. In the Sankhya Yoga, the Lord has already described the glory and indestructibility of Atma. The Atma is the one conscious principle in the universe. All else is Jada, Anatma, a mass of insentience. It is the presence of Atma that gives life and activity to the insentient mass, right from the intellect down to the body. A ball of iron is illumined when fire enters and pervades it. So Atma enters and pervades the whole universe, giving it the appearance of life and activity. All this life belongs to Atma. He is the reality in everything. So, keeping oneself in the Atmic state is the most powerful antidote to the intellect. When he acquires a stand in Atma, these lower functional instruments are deprived of the usual ramblings in the world of matter, and so they automatically come to a standstill in their own respective positions. They can no longer draw the person out and entangle him in the meshes of sense enjoyments. Even the relish or taste for enjoyment is killed when Atma is directly perceived and experienced. Thus, the Lord points out the way to conquer the senses, the mind, and the intellect all at once. Never descend to the lower plane of the senses. All should ascend to the state of Atma. This is the injunction of the Lord. The lower things then cannot trouble the person, for he would then understand that he is actually the witness to the modifications of the mind and the senses and have nothing to do with them at all. We are not the body. We are not the senses. We are not the mind. We are not the intellect. We are blessed Atma, pure and perfect, infinite and ever blissful. When this thought is firmly held, the senses lose their power over the individual and cannot betray him into sinful acts and ways of life. Question. What is the state of Atma? Answer. Atma is superior to the senses, the mind and the intellect. He is the ruler of all. The Lord ends this discourse by exhorting Arjuna to conquer Kama by the realization of Atma. 43rd sloka. Evam buddhehi param buddhva samstabhyatmanam atmana jahishatrum mahabaho kama rupam durasadam. Substance. O mighty armed Arjuna, Thus, having known what is greater than the intellect, that is Atma, and restraining the mind by the intellect, conquer the foe, Kama, in the form of desire, which the indeed hard to overcome. Commentary. The cause of all sorrow is the ignorance of man of his real self. Thinking that he is the body, the senses, and the mind, he attributes to himself all the distractions, disturbances, agitations, and sufferings. This identification with the material body and the world is the root cause of all sorrow and suffering. So the Lord exhorts all mankind, know that you are the self which is beyond the intellect. You are not the body. So take refuge in the self and conquer the indomitable foe, Kama. This is the Lord's inspiring message to suffering humanity. In fact, it is Atma that impregnates all material things with consciousness, power, and activity. Whatever power is displayed by the bodily organs, the senses, and the mind, all the power is derived from Atma, which is one indivisible ocean of power and blessedness. But as we see, these insentient instruments have acquired the appearance of reality by the interpretation of avidya. They have, as it were, become the real, and what is real? Atma is covered up by them. People have, so to say, realized the unreal and unrealized the real. Now, therefore, the seeker has to make the hard distinction between the apparently real and the really real. He should distinguish the unreal which is appearing as the real. If the reality, Atma, is experienced, the body, the senses, the mind, the intellect would immediately be subdued and brought under control. Thus, Kama is conquered. The bonds of ignorance are broken. The power of the Supreme is realized. Therefore, discrimination, persistent discrimination between the real and the unreal, is the first and foremost practice for the aspirant. By this, he would know that the various actions and functions of the senses, the mind, and the intellect have no absolute reality at all. Atma is separated from Anatma. Then all that is not Atma loses its mysterious power over the individual. Man then feels the freedom of the self, the state of Jivan Mukta. The ignorant man has tied a strong knot between Atma and Anatma. This knot should be cut so that insentient mirror is clearly distinguished from the life and light of Atma. To the realized man, Atma alone appears everywhere as the immovable, unchanging, imperishable substratum of all that exists. Then these senses and thus mind remain under his control and become servants to carry out the command of the master, the self. If the brake is applied, the fast moving train comes to a standstill. If the connecting link is cut, the fast whirling wheel of the vast machine stops rotating. Thus, the mighty wheel of the birth and death comes to a standstill when the self is realized. There is no other way to stop the wheel of samsara. If the phenomenal world is cut off from its deluding connection with the self, the whole of it ceases to have any meaning or life or significance. The delusion vanishes by the knowledge of Atma. The external world will be known as a mirage, and no one would run after a mirage when he knows it to be such. The senses do not run after material things. The mind does not hanker after pleasures and enjoyment, and the intellect has no more any part to play in the scheme of things. There is no further quest for this or that. The self alone shines as the eternal truth. It is this grand and inspiring idea which is presented to us in this magnificent verse. One should naturally feel the power of the inspiring words. O mighty armed Arjuna, conquer the foe, Jahi Shatrum Mahabaho. Arjuna is addressed as the mighty armed warrior. True, the aspirant should be like Arjuna, a hero who knows no defeat, who is ready to sacrifice his life for attaining the highest. His motto should be conquer. But what kind of foe is he to conquer? The foe to be conquered is hard indeed to overcome. Prasadam. But it is no use to underestimate the power of the enemy. The enemy, karma, is powerful because it has sent its roots deep into the heart of man and has developed into a mighty many branched tree. It should be cut and the roots pulled out of the solid earth. The sword that can cut this mighty tree of karma is detachment from the unreal and identification with Atma. This is the axe which would cut the mighty tree. Knowledge of the self is the last word of the world, of the Lord in this discourse. Karma Yoga, the yoga of action. We understand that Karma Yoga demands detachment and desirelessness, and this is possible only when man understands Atma. So, knowledge is the foundation of Karma Yoga. Nishkama karma leads to gnana, and gnana makes nishkama karma possible. So, those who desire to cross the ocean of sorrow, those who aspire to conquer karma, those who seek for liberation should understand their real nature, that they are Atma and not dead matter, the body, etc. When they know this, whether they are in the cities or forest, whether they are young or old, whether they work or cease to work, they would enjoy the supreme peace of Atma, and the world has no power to bind them again. Question: how can one conquer karma? Answer: if he knows that he is Atma, higher than the intellect, and if he is firmly established in the self state, karma is conquered. इति श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासूपनिषत्सु ब्रह्मविद्यायां योगशास्त्रे श्रीकृष्णार्जुनसंवादे कर्मयोगो नाम तृतीयोऽध्यायः. Thus, in the Upanishads of the glorious Bhagavad Gita, the science of the eternal, the scripture of yoga, the dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna ends the third discourse entitled Karma Yoga, the yoga of action.